Hello everybody and welcome back to a lecture series. I'm Ted, your host, and for this lecture we are going to continue right along with our discussion of Roman history. In our last lecture we looked at the first triumvirate. We examined the political careers of Marcus Licinius Crassus, who was always more interested in his bottom line. His career in Rome as a Roman politician mainly centered on him pushing for measures that helped his pocketbook. We examined the career of Pompey Magnus. And Pompey, he earned the nickname the Teenage Butcher. He was adept at battling. He also had the reputation of being someone who stole victories. Early on in his career, and even in the middle of his career, he was noted for appearing and fighting the decisive battle after the hard campaigning had been conducted by his contemporaries. And of course, we examined the political career and the military career of Gaius Julius Caesar, perhaps the best of the members of the first triumvirate. And also, we must keep in mind that the first triumvirate was an illegal board. A triumvirate was a legally constituted board of 3 men who were instructed by the Roman Senate and the Roman people to perform a task. The first triumvirate was an illicit gathering of the 3 most unscrupulous men in the Roman Republic. They met, they conspired, and they pushed for measures that would benefit them to the detriment of the Senate and the people. Now, picking up our narrative now, we pick up our narrative with the conclusion of the assassination of Julius Caesar. Now, the death of Julius Caesar on March 15th of 44 BCE created a power vacuum in Rome. Caesar and his other triumvirate members, they had conveniently displaced the Senate to become the ruling elite, the ruling authority in the Roman world. With the death of Crassus, it became a dual sort of hegemony between Caesar and Pompey, and then of course with the war between Caesar and Pompey, it became Caesar ruling alone, ruling the Roman world alone. With Caesar's death, there was nobody left to really take charge. And a number of groups and a number of men began to vie with one another to succeed Caesar. There were the conspirators or the liberators, the men who had assassinated Caesar, and they were led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus. This group claimed that their only goal was to restore the old republican order in Rome. And to reinforce that goal, they had special coins printed that depicted daggers. And daggers, the daggers were the weapons that they used to kill Caesar. And they had these little triangular caps. And the caps were significant because they were the caps given to freed slaves after their emancipation. And the coins were meant to symbolically represent the liberation of the Roman state from the domination or the overlordship of Julius Caesar. Now, this group was opposed by the men who tried to position themselves as the heirs of Julius Caesar, and thus the masters of the Roman world. This group, the Caesarians, were initially led by Mark Antony, who was the most prominent of Julius Caesar's lieutenant. Now, Antony has served in political offices under Julius Caesar's direction. He was a very capable commander, and he was very well known to Julius Caesar's veterans as a competent war leader. Now, Caesar's will elevated a new and previously unknown player onto the field, Octavian. Octavian was Caesar's great nephew. And he was posthumously adopted by Julius Caesar in its will, an act that shocked everybody. Octavian was then 18 years old, but Antony, he had managed to acquire Caesar's estate, his money, his records, and most importantly, Caesar's armies. Under Roman law, when you were adopted, you were permitted to take the name of the person who adopted you. Octavian used this established Roman custom to change his name to Gaius Julius Caesar Octavian. Using the name of his adopted father, and this would be a powerful tool, a powerful weapon in Octavian's arsenal. Now, the name granted Octavian greater influence in the Roman world than any of his competitors, since throughout the Roman world there were literally thousands of veteran soldiers, local elites, and common people who had become indoctrinated to serve a Caesar, to follow a Caesar, and most importantly, to support a Caesar loyally. Octavian, in one fell swoop, became the patron of all these peoples. He instantly acquired a personal army. He instantly became a major player in his own right. Now, Caesar's funeral became a cause célèbre in the Roman world. Antony's now lost funeral oration and the dramatic presentation of Caesar's bloody toga, along with a wax replica of Caesar's cadaver with all of the dagger wounds, and this wax replica with the dagger wounds was placed on a revolving platform so that all the crowd could have access to the view. Now, Antony's presentation, his visual presentation, and his very dramatic speech sent the crowd into a frenzy. The crowd spontaneously cremated Julius Caesar's body in the Roman Forum. They also burnt the Roman Senate house to the ground. The liberators fled. They fled, they panicked and they fled from the city of Rome. They went to the eastern provinces, and they were terrified that the Roman mob would turn their wrath upon them. The flight of the liberators left Rome in the hands of the Caesarian party, whose leadership was jointly contested by Mark Antony and Octavian and Caesar Octavian. Octavian composed a private army of 5 legions composed of Caesar's veteran soldiers. The Senate, then out of fear or amazement, allowed Octavian to run for the office of consul. Octavian was only 19 years old at the time. This was unheard of. This was unprecedented in Roman history. Octavian and Antony, they both wanted to control the Caesarian party and Rome, but neither was willing to strike the first blow. Neither was strong enough to defeat the other or to counter the liberators in the east. The two put their differences on hold, and they began to work together to defeat the liberators. And they wanted to defeat the liberators in the east. The liberators and the Caesarian party, they came together in 42 BCE to have a decisive battle. The battle was fought between the two parties, and Octavian, if remembered, has one of the poorer Roman commanders. He was a very poor sailor, and he was a poor commander. He was defeated by the liberator forces in his zone of control. Antony was a good commander. Antony emerged victorious in his zone of control, and his victory, his forces, what they accomplished on the field of battle was enough to give the Caesarian forces a victory. Antony and his forces, they secured the victory for the Caesarian party during the battle. The liberators were either captured or killed during the battle or committed suicide after the battle. We do not know what happened to Marcus Junius Brutus. One of the great mysteries of Roman history is what happened to him. We don't know if he was killed in the battle. We don't know if he survived it and simply went on into hiding. His body was not discovered after the battle, and we have no records of him after the battle. So that's like a sort of mystery in Roman history. Now, the defeat of the liberators brought the conflict between Antony and Octavian back to the forefront of Roman society. Again, neither man was quite ready to challenge and depose the other, so they decided to divide the Roman world between themselves. Antony, the elder and the more experienced of the two, took possession of the rich eastern provinces. Octavian claimed Rome and the western provinces, while a prominent Roman patrician, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, was brought into the fold, and he was given Carthage along with the African provinces of the Roman Empire. The agreement was sealed by the marriage of Octavian's sister Octavia to Anthony. This arrangement is known as the Second Triumvirate, and it is a direct nod to the first triumvirate of Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. Now, Anthony went off to the east to secure to take up residency in its eastern provinces, but he ended up in Egypt, where Cleopatra of the Ptolemaic dynasty and Anthony met. They kindled a romance, and they embarked on a love affair. Now, the affair led Anthony to break off his marriage, to end his marriage with Octavia. Octavia left Anthony, and she returned to Rome. This was a direct affront to Octavian. The alliance between Anthony and Cleopatra granted Anthony access to the large Ptolemaic army, to the large Ptolemaic navy, and most importantly to the Ptolemaic treasury. The wealth of Egypt was now at Anthony's disposal. Now, Anthony could not match, could easily now outmatch Octavian. Anthony's newfound wealth and strength was just unbelievable to Octavian. So Octavian opted to embark on what is now really regarded as one of the greatest public relation campaigns of all time. Octavian rebranded himself as a stalwart champion of the Roman Republic, portraying himself as the Republic's defenders against the dangers of a foreign enemy, the foreign enemy being Cleopatra. Octavian was able to associate Anthony negatively with the image of a king. And of course, the Romans, they had this unbelievable detection for kingship. There was no dirtier no dirtier road in Roman politics than the word king. And Octavian, he began to associate Anthony with the kingship and with the title of king. Cleopatra was a queen. She was a queen in her own right, a queen regnant. Anthony had the open appearance of a king. He positioned himself as her consort. Octavian was adept at exploiting the Roman destructive kingships. He spread rumors about Cleopatra's design for Rome. Anthony was implicit because of his ongoing romantic affair with Cleopatra, and he was implicated in her design for Rome. He was positioned as the unwitting tool for this foreign queen's designs on the Roman Republic, on the Roman world. Now, Octavian was extremely successful at portraying Anthony as Cleopatra's pawn, as the pawn of the foreign queen. And we still have the stereotype of Cleopatra to this day. Now, the end result for Octavian was that he was able to portray the civil war between himself and Anthony as a war between the Roman Republic and an Eastern despot. So it's a very remarkable feature, a very remarkable outcome for the campaign for Anthony. Octavian's masterpiece his masterpiece move was to have the Roman Senate declare Cleopatra an enemy of the Roman Republic. This put Anthony in a quandary. He could either sever his ties with Cleopatra, losing his financial backing, or he could stand by her, defying the Roman Senate, and initiate a civil war. This maneuvering took a decade to play out. Anthony was the more skilled commander, but luckily for Octavian, he had a friend, Agrippa, and Agrippa turned out to be one of the greatest military commanders in Roman history. Anthony had a larger army and a larger navy than Octavian, but Agrippa seized the momentum and he seized control of the seas. He did it by blockading Anthony's army. The final and the decisive battle between Octavian and Anthony took place at a site called Actium, and the Battle of Actium was fought in 31 BCE. The battle was a naval battle, a showdown between Anthony and Agrippa. And Agrippa managed to outmaneuver and defeat Anthony. It wasn't a very stunning, it wasn't an outright decisive, it wasn't a completely lopsided victory, but it was a victory for Agrippa. Anthony and Cleopatra escaped. They escaped the battle They returned to Egypt, and they very famously committed suicide. Antony fell on his sword in true Roman fashion. That was something that the Romans did. You committed suicide rather than fall into the hands of your enemy. That was a mark that was an heroic mark in Roman society. Cleopatra, of course, she was bit by an asp. Now, Octavian was now the sole master of the Roman world, but he faced essentially the same problem that Caesar had faced, which was ruling Rome as one man with no equal, while avoiding being labeled or associated with a kingship. Caesar had failed to solve the dilemma. Octavian had the hindsight of Caesar's failures. He had the hindsight of working from the position of the knowledge of Caesar's failures, and he moved forward to meet the challenge. He knew that he had to avoid giving off the appearance of arrogance. He could not maintain a monopoly on the consulship. The patricians would resent that because they themselves wanted prestige and honor. They had their own veritas to satisfy. Octavian knew he had to respect the traditions of the Roman Republic while ensuring that no dramatic changes frightened the people of the Roman world. Now, while he was creating this new world, while he was creating these new institutions to effectively govern as one man. Now, Octavian's success at crafting a lasting, agreeable settlement rested on presenting and preserving the illusion that he was not creating new institutions. Appearances, he learned, mattered more than reality. Now, Octavian wanted the various powers of the state officers and the magistrates of the Roman Republic. He made an arrangement where he would be granted the powers of every Roman state office, but not the offices themselves. This allowed the Romans to elect 2 consuls annually who nominally ran the Roman state. In the new settlement, Octavian will be lurking behind them with equivalent and superior powers. Octavian did not exercise these powers on a day-to-day basis, however. Octavian had the powers of every office, so he could introduce legislation and he could exercise the veto on legislation that he disliked. The patricians, they still competed and they won offices as before, but Octavian was superimposed on the political life of the Roman world. He was now in a position where if he needed to invoke one of his many powers, he could do so at any time. Octavian faced another problem, and this problem was in reorganizing the Roman Republic, which really was in another quandary because they didn't know what to call him. He didn't know what to call himself. Now, he considered taking the name Romulus after the founder of Rome, but this was a bad choice. He wanted to do so because he wanted to draw connections to his refounding of the Republic after the recent turmoil. But he could not use the name Romulus because Romulus, even though Romulus had founded Rome, Romulus had been a king, and again, king is a dirty word. It's a dirty word in the Roman political life of the Republic. Now, Octavian's solution was to adopt a series of new names that, while individually do not seem that threatening, collectively indicated his quiet revolution. Now, the first of his new names was Augustus, the name that he is best remembered by today. He's remembered as Caesar Augustus. And now, Augustus implies a devotion to the gods or divine qualities. The ambiguity served Augustus well. He was able to portray himself as pious while suggesting that he had more favor with the gods than other Romans. Another name he acquired was Princeps. This name translates to first citizen. The name could be interpreted as either emphasizing that he was that he was somehow superior to all of his fellow citizens while still being a citizen, a citizen on the same level as them, though he was slightly superior. The next title he took was Pater Patriae, which translates exactly as Father of the Country. Now, the name, while direct and precise, conjures a number of feelings and images. A father is a provider and a defender. And in Roman society, a father was also a very demanding person. It was a very demanding role. A father commanded or demanded the loyalty and respect of his family. He also had very broad powers within his family. So again, a very a name with ambiguous meanings. Now, the last name that he took on was Imperator. An imperator was a spontaneous shout that soldiers gave to successful commanders after battle. His name carried implications of military skill. All of these new names were official titles of Augustus's, of Octavian's. All subsequent Roman emperors would adopt these names and these titles. At the conclusion of these new names being taken, his full name was Gaius Julius Caesar, because he took on his adopted father's name, but he kept his name Octavian or Octavianus, and he added the other name. So it will be Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus Augustus Princeps Pater Patriae Imperator. A mouthful, but very ambiguous and very misleading. It took you in all these different directions. You had Julius Caesar being conjured up. You have him, as he was Octavian, being conquered up. You have this new name, Augustus. This is this name that implies divine association or divine favoritism being shown to him. Princeps being the first citizen of the republic, the father of the republic, of the country, and of course the successful general. So a lot to take in with these new names of Augustus. Now, the final component of the new Augustan settlement was that Augustus avoided showing the arrogance that Caesar had exhibited. Augustus dressed simply. He ate common Roman staple foods. He lived in a modest house. He always treated senators with courtesy and respect. Augustus also benefited from the relatively long stretches of internal stability that came about from his conquest, from his victories in the civil wars. The new settlement was pushed along by internal concord. Augustus established the pattern that would be followed by every emperor during the course of his career. The Roman Republic, the Republic ends, and the first phase of the empire begins, the Principate. And now, Augustus's settlement was also helped along by the fact that he lived long enough to enforce his settlement. He gained power as a teenager in 44 BCE. He eliminated all his rivals by the time he was 31 in 31 BCE, and he lived until 14 CE, the year 14 AD. When he died, there were not many Romans who could remember the true republic. The only world they knew was the world of Octavian, the world that Augustus had created. He continued his clever use of public relations. Augustus funded many building projects, which underscored his new rule. He also wrote an autobiography of himself, the Re Gestae, a piece of propaganda that is really a masterpiece. It glosses over the more unsavory acts of his reign while promoting his greatest achievements. Now, Augustus's foreign policy, now under his foreign policy, the rapid expansion of the empire stopped. It comes to an almost grinding halt. Under Augustus, all of the territory of the empire was solidified. All the Roman possession of these territories were solidified. After Actium, Egypt was seized, had the personal property of Caesar Augustus, and it was held separately from Roman provinces. The state that Augustus inherited was primarily an assortment of provinces ringing the Mediterranean Sea. Augustus tried to expand the empire only once. And this attempt resulted in one of the greatest military blunders in Roman history, the Varian disaster. Now, Julius Caesar campaigns into Gaul, into basically western to like Central Europe on the far extreme of Eurasia, brought all of Gaul under Roman control. Now, Gaul's borders with the borders of Roman Gaul of this new province became the then unknown Rhine River. Now, on the other side of the Rhine River were a number of bellicose Germanic tribes. Now, the Romans under Augustus made periodic incursions into Germania. And in 9 CE, a general by the name of Publius Quintilius Varus was sent by Augustus to lead an expedition into Germania. A German leader named Arminus or Hermann deceived Varus and led him into a trap where the Romans were ambushed and decimated. Now, the Roman way of war needed to be operated in open fields and needed open space for the legions to get out there and to engage in their sword fight. The legions were restricted and not fully operational in forested areas. In a chaotic setting, the legions disintegrated. They needed flat areas for their superior drilling and discipline to be effective. Varus was led into the German forest where 3 full legions were lost at the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. Now, Augustus, it is said, would wander around thereafter in his palaces, in his home, shouting, "Varus, give me back my legions." It's very doubtful that he did so, but it would underscore just how much of a disaster that it was to the Romans at the time, that 3 full legions would be decimated in the course of just one single battle. Now, the Varian disaster aside, Augustus's reign was pretty peaceful and stable, and he ended the chronic malcontent and the civil wars that had been plaguing the Roman world since they really began to expand and take on the full mantle of an imperial people. Now, there was one other area where Augustus really failed, and that was the stable transfer of power from one generation to another, granting the most qualified candidate the right to succeed. This was an area where he generally failed, and it will become a recurring problem in Roman history. Part of his problem was that he himself had fathered no sons. And the ambiguous nature of his own position, the ambiguity that he had orchestrated, that he had put in place, along with the fact that he didn't have any sons of his own, complicated the succession. He gained power through hereditary rights, and he sought to transfer power through hereditary means to his own family members. And he established the precedent of transferring power through male relatives, which reflect the Roman patrician customs of transferring clients from patron to patron based on the proximity of kinship. Now, the great disadvantage of a long life was that Augustus outlived his nephew and 2 of his grandsons, the obvious heirs that he would have chosen. Germanicus, his stepson, was also his stepson, and the man who was rumored to be his biological son. They all predeceased him. Now, the man who eventually succeeded Octavian was not someone that he would have wanted to succeed him. His stepson Tiberius inherited the imperial powers at the age of 55 in 14 AD. Now, Tiberius had a very grim disposition, and he's remembered as being socially awkward. Now, despite these traits, he was a very conscientious ruler, but later withdrew from public life and secluded himself on the island of Capri. Now, Tiberius died in the year 37, and he was followed by emperors who largely did not live up to the Augustan standards. Augustus, he also influenced the modern vocabulary. The word prince is derived from princeps, empire and emperor are derived from imperator, and Tsar and Kaiser are derived from Caesar. Has are the word Caesar and Cesare. They're all derived from Caesar. So those are some of the more sort of like everyday, average, notable influences on vocabulary from Augustus's reign. We will break here, and when we come back, we will look at the lives and the careers and the adventures of some of Augustus's successors. As always, hit like, subscribe, and comment. I am Ted. Let me know what you thought about this lecture. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. Happy to continue our journey looking into and delving into Roman history.